the Farmer to Farmer podcast, episode 150. Holy cow, that feels like a kind of milestone. Anyway, this is your host, Chris Blanchard. My guest today, John Good, farms with his wife, Aimee, at the Good Farm in Germansville, Pennsylvania. 10 acres of vegetables serve 200 CSA members, plus a farmer's market and some wholesale sales. 2017 was their first year farming on this land under this name, after 11 years of renting ground at the Rodale Institute, where they operated their private farm business, Quiet Creek Farm. John and Aimee took a very strategic and long-term approach to getting their own land. John shares how they developed their farm business on their rented land at Rodale, including how they prioritized their investments and how they built the markets and off-farm equity that helped them make the transition to their own land. We talk about how they developed their new infrastructure on blank ground, how they financed their land purchase, and how they found a piece of property that met their needs. And before they started Quiet Creek Farm, John and Aimee worked at Food Bank Farm in Hadley, Massachusetts. Food Bank Farm ran an incredibly efficient, intense vegetable operation for a long time, and John shares how he and Aimee have adapted the systems they learned there for crew management and operational efficiency, but without the same intensity. And John shares how he has carried that farm's maniacal focus on weed control forward into his own farming operations without a bunch of fancy tools. The Farmer to Farmer podcast is generously supported by Vermont Compost Company, founded by organic crop-growing professionals committed to meeting the need for high-quality compost and compost-based living soil mixes. For certified organic plant production, VermontCompost.com. And by Local Food Marketplace, helping farms and food hubs around North America implement easy-to-use online ordering systems that integrate with a full management system for order packing, invoicing, and payment processing. Contact localfoodmarketplace.com to learn more. And by BCS America. BCS two-wheel tractors are versatile, maneuverable in tight spaces, lightweight for less compaction, and easy to maintain and repair on the farm. Gear-driven and built to last for decades of dependable service. BCSAmerica.com. John Good, welcome to the Farmer to Farmer podcast.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Thanks for joining us. I'd like to start off today by having you tell us about the Good Farm, where you guys are located, how much you're doing, and where you're taking your produce to market.
Sure. The Good Farm is in Germansville, Pennsylvania. That's in the southeastern part of the state. We're a certified organic vegetable farm. We grow 10 acres of organic vegetables for primarily a CSA community of 200 members. We do a little bit of wholesale and one farmer's market in addition to that, but we've are now and kind of always been primarily CSA farmers. And this is our first year working at the Good Farm. My wife, Aimee, and I previously ran Quiet Creek Farm, which we operated on leased land at the Rodale Institute for the previous 11 years. We bought this property that we're at now about 4 years ago, and we've been building infrastructure here. And this season was our first year actually farming on our own land and operating under the new name as the Good Farm.
So when you say you were leasing farmland at the Rodale Institute, you weren't part of the Rodale Institute then. You guys were running your own business there.
Correct. We ran our own business at Rodale. I always called it kind of like a mutually beneficial relationship. You know, we got the chance to farm on land that wasn't our own, and it was great certified organic soil, obviously being at Rodale. And we kind of provided Rodale with a working model of a CSA farm on their property to demonstrate to visitors and other people in the area. It was we were kind of a nice way for them to demonstrate how a smaller farm could operate within their larger farm and be successful. And it was a great situation for us. It was kind of like our stepping point between managing a farm, and we were able to own our own business and run it at Rodale. Even though we were on their land, we were independent from them, and then eventually build the capital to buy our own property and sort of finally, at 40 years of age, realize the dream of buying our own land and farming at our own home.
How long were you farming at Quiet Creek Farm at Rodale?
We were at Rodale for 11 years. We had a 1-year lease and then 2 successive 5-year leases there.
Great. So, I mean, you really had a long time to build your business in that location.
We did. We started there I think it was around 2006, I believe, or 2005. So we had a lot of time to start our business there. And it was also sort of that time period where CSA shares were really easy to sell. There weren't as many CSA farms in the area at that time, so it was really a good place for us to sort of be a proving ground for our business and our growing skills. We had managed another farm for 4 years prior to that in Chester County, Pennsylvania, So we definitely had some of the growing chops by that point. But at Rodale, we were really able to build our business up. I mean, we originally started there around 185 CSA members, and our last 2 or 3 years, they were up around 275.
Was the land the only thing that you were using that belonged to Rodale? Did you have your own tractors and your own packing shed and things like that, or were you cooperating with them with that stuff?
We leased other spaces from Rodale. They had a small greenhouse on their property. When I say small, like 48 by 24, it wasn't tiny, but it was small for their uses that we leased. We leased a barn space from them that we used as our packing shed. It had a small walk-in cooler and an area where we could set up our wash pack station. We didn't borrow much equipment. I bought a cultivating tractor as soon as we moved there because I knew cultivating was going to be our primary sort of labor expenditure on the farm. So we put a lot of money into vegetable cultivation right away. In our first year, 2 or maybe 3, we hired Rodale to do a lot of our tillage because they had really big equipment. They could do tillage really fast. Like they could do it faster, custom for me than I could doing it myself. It was more expensive for me to do my tillage than to hire Rodale to do that. And so we did that our first couple of years. And then as our business grew, we eventually bought a tillage tractor, a spading machine, and slowly we sort of took over all the things that we used to hire them to do. But, they sort of, again, like, it was really helpful that we were able to do those things slowly, like invested all our money equipment wise into weed control right off the start. And then we sort of built backwards as much as from there, we sort of went backwards from the way everybody else goes and put our money into tillage and planting. But originally we put our money into weeding, and Rodale did all our tillage for us. We would hire them, pay them by the hour to plant our cover crops for us. And a lot of that sort of bigger field work that they were really well equipped to do, more so than we were in the early years.
I actually think it makes a lot of sense. I mean, I think about the investments that we made in our farm when we were getting started, and in some ways, I think we would have been a lot better off had we invested in mechanical weed control equipment right from the start and spent less money and effort on some of the other elements of the operation, because that is just such a critical factor, especially in a beginning farm situation.
Yeah, definitely. If you can control those weeds right from the start, you have a better chance. And again, tillage is an easy thing to hire. It doesn't really require a lot of your time and effort. I spend way more time out on the cultivating tract than we do doing tillage. So we really wanted to focus on that in the early years. And we had learned that sort of from managing a farm before and the farms we worked on when we were apprentices. We really have been focused on weed control first and foremost. And then we sort of built all our other systems out from there when we designed our farm. And that's, for the most part, worked pretty well for us.
You mentioned 4 years of managing production at another farm before you started your own farm, Quiet Creek at Rodale. But then you were also apprenticing and interning on farms before you had your other management experience, right?
Yeah, we apprenticed for 2 years. I went to school at UMass, which is in Amherst, Massachusetts. So that's sort of where we became exposed to farming. And we apprenticed for 1 year there at the food bank farm in Hadley, Massachusetts. And a second year we apprenticed at Caretaker Farm in Williamstown, Massachusetts. And with both those farms, we were part of the CRAFT program, which in the Pioneer Valley area of Massachusetts, they called the Collaborative Regional Alliance for Farmer Training. It's a mouthful of an acronym, but that was what it was named. And we also got exposure to a lot of other really good farms in that area. Brookfield Farm was in that group. John Paul Corten's farm, Roxbury, was in there. Homestead Farm was in there at the time. Hawthorne Valley. So some really great, and also sort of really pioneering farms in sort of CSA and just organic farming. The rebirth of organic farming, sort of late 80s and early 90s, were from that region, and we got to learn from those folks when we were getting started.
And we've actually had Don Zasada and Bridget Spann of Caretaker Farm have been on the show in the past. And of course, Dan Kaplan from Brookfield and Jean-Paul Cortens have all been part of the show. So, interesting closing of some loops there. But you mentioned Food Bank Farm in Massachusetts. And I remember going, it must have been 1995 or 1996, sitting down with Richard DeWilde at Harmony Valley Farm and watching videos from Food Bank Farm about how they efficiently ran their operation. And when I think about a big farm that really just knew how to crank out produce, well, can you tell us a little bit more about Food Bank Farm?
Sure. I mean, what the farmers did at the food bank farm was amazing. We were growing 40 acres of vegetables, and that's 40 acres in production. It wasn't a 40-acre farm. There were 40 acres of vegetable fields. I always think that's a key differentiation when people are talking about farms. So they actually had 40 acres in vegetable production, and we're managing that with 2 farmers and 4 apprentices. Primarily, that was the workforce. So you can imagine now people, I think, with similar sized farms have crews of like 15, 20 people, the amount that they were kind of cranking out with a really bare bones crew and really bare bones equipment too. It just didn't have that much infrastructure at that time. And also part of the arrangement there with the farmers at that time was they had a lease. The Food Bank of Western Massachusetts actually owned the property on which the food bank farm operated. And the lease payment the food bank farm business paid to the food bank was 50% of the produce they grew by weight was donated to the food bank of Western Mass. So, I mean, I think your audience obviously understands how hard it is to grow produce profitably in any way, shape, or form. But then imagine giving half of it away by weight as your lease for your land. So the food bank had developed really, really efficient systems. And yeah, I remember those videos. They were VHS tapes.
Yes.
I think that was circulated at that time, showing you the harvest techniques on the food bank. And I don't think people even really know anymore that so much of what they do has sort of come down through secondhand through those VHS tapes in you said, the mid to late 90s. And lots of things, that Linda Hildebrandt, the one farmer there, I think lots of people spaced their crops based on the information that she laid out on those early years at the food bank farm, just sort of laying the groundwork like a foundation that so much has been built on since then.
So for the people that weren't plugging in those VHS tapes back in 1995 and 96, and I've sometimes thought it would be really interesting to resurrect those and get those back out in circulation again, because I mean there was just such an abundance of like 100 different ways that you could make your farm 5 or 10% more efficient in every element of its operation. And they had really just figured out how to, I mean, just how to really just nail every little thing that they were doing. And I would think it must have been a little intimidating to go from a farm like that and go start working on your own.
Well, that the sort of what we learned from working at the food bank was these great systems, and we really liked their systems. Things were really efficient there. When we had moved to caretaker after that, it was a much smaller farm, and we were working the same amount of hours with the same size crew to get, less work done really. And we always thought that, the small farm model hadn't really learned the efficiency that the food bank was forced to learn because of the size it was and the production sort of demands it had. But we also saw at the food bank farm that the pace was really frenetic, and that was part of what made it work, was really just endless drive and really, really real big focus on speed. And we liked working fast, don't get me wrong, but we also knew that we didn't think we'd be able to kind of keep that up our whole careers. So when we moved to our own farm, we thought, if we could take some of these sort of the techniques and principles from the food bank, which was this really big, really efficient farm, and apply them to, a much smaller scale. I never really wanted to do, say, more maybe than 10 to 15, 20 acres. And then I could apply some of those same techniques to a smaller scale. We could have sort of the same results, but maybe not have to work quite so hard. Have some time in our life for other interests and to do more than just farm. And so we weren't so much intimidated as I think almost excited or curious to see what we could do with what we learned at the food bank on a smaller scale and maybe free ourselves up to pursue some other interests or just maybe to farm at a pace that would let us keep farming over the long term. I often think of farming as it's like being a professional athlete, and it's not so much in the sense of that we're required to have high performance, but in terms of wear and tear in your body. And the advantage a professional athlete has is that they make tens of millions of dollars and get to retire when they're 35 or 40. And farmers are just really starting to hopefully get halfway decent at what they're doing at
Right.
35 or 40. So your body's got to hold up over the long term, and that's where we wanted to use these sort of really efficient production systems on hopefully a smaller scale, and then maybe not have so much wear and tear, both on our bodies and psychologically, because farming is a very psychologically taxing job too. So we really were appreciative of the experience we had at the food bank, and we still talk about it. And I talk about it with my apprentices. They probably get sick of hearing the term the food bank farm or the way we did it on the food bank farm, but here it is, almost 20 years later, and I still think of all the things I learned there. That at the time, I think most of them I didn't even realize the importance of what I was learning, but we've kind of carried it with us, ever since, and it's always been sort of a benefit we just sort of had in our back pocket by working there our first year ever farming.
Well, and I mean, right there, that's something too, to have that be the first experience that you had farming rather than coming on to
Definitely.
that 3 or 4 years in. So when you talk about bringing some of what you learned at Food Bank Farm to your operation at Quiet Creek and I assume now at the Good Farm, what sorts of things did you bring? What are some concrete examples of systems that you brought over and scaled down?
The biggest systems we learned at the food bank, let's say there's two, but the first big thing was just a really, almost maniacal focus on weed control. We spent, we were either harvesting or controlling weeds, and that was either mechanically or by hand. We did a lot of hand work there too. But we sort of learned that the premise of keeping, your farm as free of weeds as you can over the long term, trying to deplete the weed seed bank sort of right from the start. It was just sort of drilled into us, that it's just an element of almost your face at some point that you just know that weeds need to be controlled. And so bringing that with us right off the bat on any land we worked, it was sort of our immediate focus was weeds, weeds, weeds. And if you can keep weeds under control or at least stay ahead of them a little bit, you have a chance to do everything else that matters on your farm. So that was a big thing. And the mechanical systems themselves maybe aren't the most crucial thing in the world, but just to know that you needed a mechanical system. I didn't necessarily use all the same tools and equipment that the food bank used, but I used the same principles in terms of controlling weeds early, controlling them often, stale seed bed preparation, those sort of treatments to really keep things under control. The other thing that we took a lot from the food bank was, I think, in harvest efficiency. We did everything at the food bank as a crew. Everybody on the crew did every job together, and there's something about that kind of cohesiveness of a team unit, and everybody knows how to do everything was really valuable. And again, we still farm that way, and it's not even almost a conscious decision. It's just because that's how we started, and we just kind of felt like that's how you do it because we learned it there. And so the food bank, we did all harvesting as a crew. Washing was mostly done as a crew, and washing was really fast. There was a sense there, or sort of a pressure there because we were doing so much with so few people. Was things were really quick and dirty. Maybe not really dirty, but really quick. And we sort of always learned that kind of, again, just pushing the pace as fast as you can do something. An expression I use with my employees when they're taking too long to maybe wash something is, don't make love to it, just wash it. Get it in the water, get it back out, and keep going. And again, you had to do that on that scale. But after a season of doing that, that becomes the way you just kind of do things for the rest of your life. And so those are the two things, sort of the broad topics I think that we got from the food bank was that the weed control piece and the working as a crew and a lot of good harvest techniques. The food bank did things very efficiently harvest wise with, again, really no equipment. We dug all our carrots with a fork at the food bank farm, and we were digging, I don't remember the amounts, but I'm sure it was 500 to 1,000 pounds of carrots every picking, and we would do that with a fork. But it was just in terms of pacing and movement, and a lot of it was just really in flow kind of things, just making sure there was always somebody, everybody knew what was next and was always getting set up for that. And I think those two areas were really important for us. And like I said, we still tell our apprentices about it all the time. was such a valuable experience working there.
You mentioned something like even the harvesting the carrots with the forks, but they kind of turned the carrot harvest on their head. And this was a technique that I learned from them that we used on our farm was they would strip the tops from the carrots while the carrots were still in the ground so that you weren't sitting there holding the carrot and snapping it. You were kind of pushing your hand along the row and just pulling all the greens off and throwing them in the wheel track.
Yeah, we would top all the carrots first. And it's still, I actually don't do that as much anymore because I sometimes have bunching carrots for other markets and other uses. But at the food bank, all carrots went out topped and weighed. Yeah, and people still think that's crazy when you tell them that. But, it's quicker to, like you said, just go down the row. We would crawl down the row on our hands and knees, do a sort of a push and pull motion. The tops break off. Somebody else is coming right behind you with a fork, and somebody else is coming right behind them, and the carrots just go right from the ground into in the case of the food bank was 5-gallon buckets. That's what we would harvest into. And it's like you said, it sounds backwards, but it's actually a quicker, more efficient way to move down the row.
You talk about how you talk to your crew about Food Bank Farm until they're sick of it. But I do remember one of the things that Michael Doctor, one of the farmers there, told me when I got to meet him in 1997 was that was just how important the whole crew attitude was and kind of creating a culture around working the way that you work and just how critical of a part of the operation that was.
Yeah, it's something that we definitely felt there because the food bank, when we worked there, you were worked really hard. I mean, it was, sort of referred to in the circle of apprentices up there as the boot camp of organic farms because of the pace we were required to work at. You were supposed to run from one job to the other, like not walk if you didn't have a vehicle. So there was some really intense stuff like that, but we did have this crew mentality that you felt like you were members of a team. And a lot of that was because Michael and Linda too were always working with you. You didn't have sort of these absentee farm managers. I mean, they had other jobs to do as well and they would go do them, but you knew when push come to shove, they would always be there alongside you and generally, outworking us 20-year-olds. So even though you worked hard, you felt respected and valued. And that sort of led to this culture, that we were the food bank farm, we were a team, and that always sort of just contributed to a good attitude among the crew. And when the crew has a good attitude, things get done, and tough work can become something that's sort of fun, and you can gain a sense of I'm not sure what the word I'm looking for, but sort of tough tasks become easier when you work on it with a lot of people who are committed to it. And, I think it's something you see more in farms now. A lot of people have sort of more divided tasks up and have separate managers for separate areas of the farm. And we've just never really moved that way. We've always appreciated working as a crew, and we still kind of instill that sort of culture on our farm. And I don't know if it's because of that or not, but we've always had, I think good crews, and we generally have people who are happy, and we have a lot of people come back to our crew as apprentices for second or third years over the years. We've had some people work for us like for 10 years. And I think part of that is because you don't feel that you're just working for a farmer. You feel like you're working together to accomplish the goal of the farm. And we learned that at the food bank, and I think we still sort of apply that on our own farm here.
When you started Quiet Creek Farm at Rodale, how did you make that arrangement happen? Like, did you go to Rodale and say, we need 10 acres to start a vegetable farm?
We were managing another farm at that point in Chester County, a Charlestown cooperative farm for the Anderson family down there. And at that point, my wife and I wanted to move closer to our home, which was about an hour north of there, around Lehigh or Berks County, Pennsylvania. Both our parents lived 2 miles from each other, so we were always trying to get closer to our families. And we were thinking about sort of the next step of starting our own business. And I saw an ad, I believe it was in the PASA newsletter, which is the Pennsylvania Association of Sustainable Agriculture, their newsletter, that they were looking for a farmer to start a CSA on the Rodale Institute. They had someone there previously who had moved on to another position, and they were looking for someone. So that was about 15 minutes from my wife, Aimee, and I, our hometown. So we called up Jeff Moyer, who's now the director at Rodale, and went in and talked to him about it. And, we hit it off right away. Jeff's one of the greatest people I've ever met, a good friend of mine. we talked to him, and we could tell sort of right away that we clicked. He liked us, we liked him, and at that point, we actually continued farming at the farm we were at for another year, where Rodale sort of laid some of the groundwork for us to come. They got some of the fields that we wanted ready, plowed and planted to cover crops. They actually put the walk-in cooler that they had in their warehouse, sort of collecting dust at that time, but they put that into the barn. That was going to be our CSA pickup site. They got the greenhouse cleaned out, and so it'll be ready for us the next year. We were able to come down that October and plant garlic seed on the new land, so we'd have garlic right away the following year. And that was how we got in there. Was sort of through an ad in the newsletter, and then meeting with Jeff, and then took a year of prep work, and then the following year we bought a house about 5 miles from Rodale and started farming there. And we're there for a decade more.
What a great way to start a farm, and something that I feel like is really an unusual opportunity for somebody to have that full year of really preparation time and just, well, yeah, just getting things ready.
Yeah, I mean, it was an unbelievable experience and a great opportunity. And it's definitely hard to find out there, but we happened to luck upon it. It happened to be in our backyards. Sometimes things just work out if you just kind of keep making the right, or hopefully making the right choices in life. Opportunities sort of arise. It's kind of how I sort of have lived my life, and it's so far worked okay. But yeah, that we were just presented with this great opportunity to farm on great land at the Rodale Institute, this great name in organic agriculture, and those opportunities are definitely hard for young farmers. Although I think sort of through that model at Rodale and some other, you're sort of seeing more of these nonprofit kind of incubator farms pop up around the country. And I think there are more of those opportunities than there were, but we just happened to luck into a great one at that time.
When you started farming at Quiet Creek Farm at Rodale, did you jump right in with 10 acres of production, or did you guys do what I think is maybe a more common model and start with a couple and gradually scale up?
We started with, it wasn't quite 10, but I think we started with 7 or 8 there our first year. And I know Jeff was nervous about that because he wanted to make sure we'd be able to handle that much land. But, we assured him that's what we had been doing in Chester County. We knew how to do it. And we were starting our own business, and we had a mortgage to pay now, and we needed to produce. And we knew the land there was good land and was going to be able to produce for us. And, we felt confident in our own skills. So we had an experience at our previous farm at Charlestown, where we started out with 2 or 3 acres, progressed to about 8 acres while we were there. So we sort of had our growing period at that farm, and we moved to Rodale. We're like, okay, we're going to start right off. I think we did about 150 shares that first year in a farmer's market. I think we did 2 markets, actually. We weren't worried about production at that point. We knew that we could pretty much do that. Our main concerns were operating our own business from scratch now. And we knew what we needed to do in terms of getting the crop in the ground and out of the ground. Now we were just looking to really make enough money to make a living and, like I said, pay a mortgage and support ourselves full time.
It does seem like a pretty bold move when you're starting your own business to buy a house that same year.
Yeah, we've done a couple of those that have been a little bit scary, but you have to, I would say that I am very methodical. Like, I'm not a risk taker by nature, by any means. So, I wouldn't make that jump unless I felt really secure that I could do it. And our house was also, kind of run down. I'm a carpenter on the side, so I was working on that too. I sort of thought, well, if this falls through, I'm going to have a renovated house to sell at the same time. I sort of, there was a plan behind what we were doing in both ways, but at some point, I guess you just have to take the leap one way or another, somewhere along the road. And that was just the time for us. That was when we decided to make that leap and see if we could do it. And, if we failed, we would have failed and lived and moved on. But it just so happened that, I think given the opportunity and the support that Rodale gave us, at that point we had apprenticed for 2 years and we had managed a farm for 4 years. So, we were pretty experienced, and it wasn't as scary as almost this past year was, moving to our own farm. I think it's even more scary, but maybe I'm older and smarter now, knowing enough to be scared. But so far it's all worked out.
Yeah, when you start pushing 40, that whole risk thing takes on an entirely different meaning.
Yep. Yeah. We have two kids now, and risk has a whole new meaning when you have people besides just you who are dependent on you and your risks working out.
That's
So
right. When you started the business at Quiet Creek Farm at Rodale, you said that you were confident in your growing, but the challenge was having your own business. What was different for you about having your own business relative to just managing somebody else's operation?
the biggest differences were in the administrative side. At our previous business, we had a payroll company. We had the owners of the business sort of took care of marketing and advertising and the website. We still handled most customer communications there with our CSA members, so that wasn't really different. And we still did sort of day-to-day banking and bookkeeping, but we had a lot more when we moved to the new property and sort of learning, legal structures, doing our own payroll, doing liability insurance, all sort of those aspects, kind of the unfun parts of farming that we hadn't had to focus on as much. So we had to learn that a lot more on the fly when we ran our own business. I think that was when we first had to run QuickBooks ourselves, and do all our own bookkeeping. So we had those challenges to learn in the background while we were farming. But again, we managed to. But those are sort of the things that go along with sort of running your own business, or especially running your own farm business, that most of us don't love, but you have to figure out one way or another. Print at that time was paper brochures. So we still think about sitting in the floor at night and folding trifold brochures, hundreds of brochures, and then putting them in envelopes and using a sponge and getting your stamps and envelopes, all licked with the sponge. And it was kind of a different time at that time, but it's not that long ago, but it was. And sort of doing all that kind of stuff, which we hadn't had to do when we were managing a farm for someone else.
I'm just having some flashbacks to trifold brochures and working with
Yeah.
Microsoft Publisher and trying to pretend like we knew what we were doing as graphic designers.
Yeah.
It's kind of funny. So then, I mean, you guys farm at Quiet Creek Farm for, if I'm doing the math right, about 6 years before you decide to buy the land that you're currently on.
Yeah, it was probably even a little more than that. It was probably like 7 or 8 years. I can't remember exactly what year we bought the farm, but it was maybe 4 years ago or 3 years ago. I'm not sure which, but yeah, we had decided, we had been at Rodale. We had done a 1 year lease, we had done a 5 year lease, and then we did another 5 year lease. And sort of in the middle of that second 5 year lease, we were like, we had our daughter was born by that point, and we were just sort of thinking about, do we really? It was really getting hard, kind of psychologically, to farm from 5 year lease to 5 year lease. Even though we had a good working relationship with Rodale, with any organization, sort of maybe leadership changes or maybe their vision would change. We never had super long-term security there, and we wanted to have long-term security. And I think everybody who gets into farming, kind of dreams of owning the farm. So at that point, we kind of decided to start looking a little bit, and we looked around at farms in our same area that we had lived in. We wanted something that was still hopefully in our same school district, maybe close to our same customer base, and most importantly for us, close to our families. We knew it was going to be a kind of a lengthy search, so we probably started looking about 5 years ago, and then probably bought the land maybe 3.5, 4 years ago. But again, it was kind of a very calculated decision, a very slow decision. We looked for land with infrastructure first, and really couldn't find anything that we liked. Maybe you'd find a decent house and a terrible barn and steep fields, or you'd find good fields, nice land, but just terrible dwelling. That would basically needed to be raised to be worthwhile. So then, about halfway through our search, I told my wife Aimee that we just need to look for raw land, because that's the only way we're going to get what we wanted. And so then our search shifted, and eventually that's what we did. We bought, a piece of completely undeveloped farmland, and then again, step by step, we put a driveway on it. We put a septic system on it next. We built a pole barn next. We built our house last. The way a farmer would do it, you build your barn first, and then your house. And then the year before we started farming here, we were building a greenhouse in the winter and sort of finalizing all the infrastructure so it would actually work as a working vegetable farm. So it's been a sort of slow, I don't want to say arduous, but maybe a little bit arduous process to get here. But to be living here now and had our first season here, and it was a good one. So far, so good.
And were you able to retain the CSA customers that you already had? Was that something that you were able to take with you?
We did quite a bit. Some of our CSA members, our new location was actually closer. We're only really about 15 miles from the Rodale Institute. So for maybe a third of our members or so, they were excited. They're like, oh, that farm's even closer than where it is now. And another two-thirds or so, we added some delivery sites near our old farm so we could keep those people as members who couldn't make the drive out to our new location. So we had some delivery sites in that area. And some of those we had even started the year before we left Rodale, sort of get back into deliveries again and have a sort of customer base built up. And the last thing we did was our final couple of years at Rodale. We were at Quiet Creek Farm. I think I mentioned we were around 275 CSA members. So when we moved, we sort of built that number up with the plan that when we moved, we would drop back down to around 200, both to sort of accommodate any customer attrition because of moving to a new location and having to build up a new customer base, and also to give us a little bit of wiggle room with growing on a new piece of land and making sure it was going to produce or yield, up to what we were accustomed to. We left a little bit of extra space in there and sort of filled that up by doing a farmer's market and some wholesale avenues that were a little less, there was a little less pressure on producing like there is with the CSA in those models. But again, the land ended up being really productive, so it wasn't a problem, but we wanted to have that wiggle room built in.
And with multiple years to get that land ready for vegetable farming, let me ask, what was the land in when you bought it? Was it in conventional corn and beans?
It was in conventional crops. In this area, kind of luckily, a lot of it was in conventional alfalfa, which is a popular crop in my immediate vicinity. The rest was grown in up here. It's a kind of a beans, wheat, oats, and potato rotation. There are some guys who do corn, but on this particular farm, and which is kind of common in my area, is farmers sort of use potatoes as a replacement for corn. So we had conventional potatoes here, and hay was basically what the land was in. When we bought it, we had the farmer who was custom farming it, transition to at least organic management at that point. So at that point, he put it all in organic orchard grass and alfalfa. So he hayed it for, it was 3 years before he moved here, or 2 years. And then in the third year that the farmer was here, we hired him to put in cover crops. So the following spring, ground would be ready for vegetable production, or at least we had him put a third of it into cover crops that year. And then the following year, we actually were certified organic. The first crop we ever pulled off this piece of property was able to be certified organic because we managed it organically for those couple seasons before growing vegetables here.
And so how many acres are you actually farming in vegetables now?
We have about 10 acres in vegetables here.
How many acres of tillable ground are you working with to get that 10 acres of vegetables?
The whole farm is about 18 acres. Then there's about 3 to 4 acres of woods. So I'd say it's about 14 acres of ground gives us about 10 acres. It might be probably a little less, maybe like 9.5 acres of tillable vegetable ground, not counting grass roadways, the pads around the barn and the greenhouses. Sort of, there's a lot of acreage gets eaten up in sort of roadways and being able to move around the farm efficiently.
So when you went about developing the infrastructure on the new farm property, what were some of your priorities there based on the experience that you'd had on multiple other operations with a lot of different packing houses and a lot of different greenhouses? What were you guys looking at and saying, this is what we've got to get right here?
That's a great question. I mean, the biggest thing I think right off the bat was the packing house. I've never had a really good, packing setup. And so I would say the biggest thing, right away was getting a concrete floor in our packing house, building it big enough so we could build coolers that were bigger than we needed. And then our CSA pickup room and sort of shop is in the same space too. And we also want to make that big enough so that customers could move around it and feel comfortable, not feel cramped. And luckily, I'm a claustrophobic person. I don't like people being right on my shoulder. So I try to make everything too big. I think that was a big step, was to give ourselves room to move and room to grow. And a huge one, which we had never had before, was insulating the concrete pad under our walk-in coolers And then that way, everything can roll in and out of our walk-in coolers on the concrete floor. That's just been life-changing for me. It was something I always knew I needed to do, but never had to set up to do it. So being able to sort of stack everything on rolling pallets and move it in and out of the walk-ins efficiently is life-changing in terms of body wear and tear and efficiency. So the packing house, the concrete floor, sort of designing things so there was a good flow. I was thinking about where we were going to park the harvest truck or the harvest wagon when it came back to the barn, and how we could get from there through our wash pack line into the barn efficiently. And these were all things we were never able to design intentionally, really, at the farms we worked at before, or at least not very much. And this time we had the chance to do that, at least as best as our property shape and size would let us. And so that was a big thing in terms of making things flow efficiently. Was the biggest thing in the barn and the pack shed. I'd say was the thing that we were most able to really get right this time and have it work. Greenhouses and high tunnel siting probably aren't as efficient as we'd like them to be, but we kind of try to put those things in the corners of the property, where we don't have vegetable ground, or at least our greenhouse. But even that is at this point really close to the back of our barn, where we have access then to storing greenhouse trays and seeds, and again have things sort of close at hand and handy. At Rodale, to go from the barn to the greenhouse required you getting in a truck and driving there. Where now I can walk out the back door of my barn and be at the greenhouse. So that's really handy in terms of the proximity there. And another great thing we did on the barn that I learned on the two previous farms I worked on was just sort of covered bays. The sort of core of our barn is a 30 by 80 shed is the roof of the pole barn. But then on each side of the pole barn, there's a 15-foot roofed bay, or like a shed roof coming off. And that's a 15-foot deep by 80-foot long forebay on the front side of the barn and on the back side of the barn. And those covered spaces, it's just a roof. There's no walls on it. That roof is great on the back side of the barn for storing equipment that's out of the rain and out of the weather and can be kind of messy, but still out of the elements. And the front side structure is great for wash pack and getting things into the barn, and for providing a nice entranceway for our customers when they come to do CSA pickup. So I love those covered forebays, and I love having a concrete floor into the cooler. And that's where we've probably really been able to get things right. And this is our third shot at starting a farm from scratch.
Well, and of course, different when you say start from scratch, but at Rodale, you had a building that you were fitting into, which is a lot different than being able to design something from the ground up.
It's true. As hard as it is and daunting as it is to start from the ground up, it really is an opportunity, to be able to do things finally the way that you actually think they should be done. And you're still going to mess things up. There's still things you can't foresee that you get there and you're like, oh no, this is not right. But at least you got a lot of things hopefully, more suited to your needs.
I remember Dan Gunther from Common Harvest Farm here in Wisconsin told me that when I was having a lot of angst over developing things when we started Rock Spring Farm. He said, you're not going to get it all right. At some point, you just got to move ahead and do it.
Yeah, it's true. We live by the slogan here that I don't know who coined the term, but it's ideas are a dime a dozen, but give me a deadline, and that's a valuable axiom to keep in your pocket when you're farming.
How did you guys finance the new farming operation?
Yeah, that's a good question, and it's many layers to it. The biggest one was our house. As I mentioned, we had bought a house when we started Quiet Creek Farm. And I renovated that entire house. Like the whole house was basically stripped down to studs and rebuilt. So even though like the sort of real estate crash happened while we were doing that, we still had a fair amount of equity in our house. So that was going to be sort of our first big chunk of cash to put into buying a new property and building another house. So we had that to start with. We did have some savings built up from our time at Quiet Creek Farm. We were always putting money away for different needs in our personal life and our farm life. So we had some savings built up. And the other thing that we did was we sold memberships in our CSA. I think they were like 3 or 5 year memberships to sort of a group of about 15 core members, where they could pre-purchase a share for 3 to 5 years at a set rate. And we raised, I think it was around $15,000 that way. And we used that money to, drill our irrigation wells. We used that money to do some early infrastructure work right off the bat. So that was great. We sort of did a loan from our members that way, and we did that. I think that was 2 or 3 years ago. Most of those memberships are now up. Those people are now back to joining yearly. We did that before we left Quiet Creek, so we were able to get some infrastructure built before we ever moved here. That includes drilling the wells, and I think the driveway we built that way, and we had our equity in our house that we had built up, and then the last one was an FSA micro loan to do some of the final infrastructure improvements. We built our pole barn with one loan. We paid that off, and then we took out a final loan to sort of put the concrete in our pole barn, build 2 brand new walk-in coolers in our pole barn, and build our greenhouse. So those are sort of the 3 main ways we financed getting here. We had all our equipment and supplies that we had already accumulated at Quiet Creek Farm that we were able to move here. And the rest, were fairly small, I'd say fairly small, but they were expenses we were able to fit under our budget for the year. It definitely meant we made less money than we normally would our first year farming here, because we definitely spent a lot more on sort of small infrastructure projects. But with sort of those different avenues, we were able to get here and get started.
And I really love what you said about building the pole barn and then taking out another loan to kind of turn that pole barn into a packing shed, because once you build the pole barn, now you've got something that has some equity, right? You have an asset on the farm already. And it seems to me like it would be easier to get the financing to then come in and pour a slab than to kind of get somebody to understand what's needed all at once.
To do everything all at once. And, with the Farm Service Agency's microloans, they're a small loan. So I don't know if we could have got everything in that loan all at once. But, we did one loan to build the barn. I think that was like 3 years ago. And then we paid it off, ahead of time. And, of course, that looks good then to your creditor. Like, sure, we'll give you another loan to finish it up. You guys have been reliable. So that, definitely helped. Both those things, having the building and showing that you were paying your debts to begin with.
You said, of course, being a farmer, you put in the driveway and you built the barn first and, dug the well, but you were leaving behind the house that you had that was 5 miles from Rodale. And what'd you do about that?
Yeah, this is one of those crazy parts of the story that only a farmer would do. So we were selling our house, to help build a brand new house again from the ground up at our new farm. We were going to build a house here. So we were, our bank was willing to give us a loan to build the house, but not until we sold our old house. So now we had to figure out, well, if we sell our house, where do we live while we're building the house? So this was challenge, number 400 in this whole process. So we sold our house. We sold our house for sale by owner to make some extra money that way. We accomplished that pretty quickly, which was great. But now we had to move out it was like October, so we were farming at that time. Luckily, we had our pole barn built here at the new farm, so that became our storage unit to move all of our worldly belongings into, as well as our relatives' basements and attics and anywhere else we could fit stuff. And then we moved to my wife's parents' house in the town of Aimee, and she and I lived in the attic for a year, and our 2 children lived in a 8x10 bedroom in bunk beds. And we lived there for 1 year, where we built our house. We started building our house. We broke ground around December 15th. We built most of our house over the winter, but then once the farming season came, we were building a house and farming. So I was living in my in-laws' attic, driving to the farm, to Quiet Creek Farm at Rodale, and doing my farming job there, whenever I could, and then driving to Germansville and working on building the house here, because I was working with a general contractor who was a close personal friend, and for the most part, he and I built the house with the assistance of subcontractors. So we were, sort of balancing that craziness while still running a farm business, while living in our in-laws' attic. So that was just another crazy year. But again, like I feel like I keep saying, we got through it and moved here in July of 2 years ago, again during the farm season. Moved in here during the middle of summer, but we got here. We love being here now. It's so great to finally live where you farm, after leasing land for 11 years and having to commute to water a greenhouse or to roll up the sides in the high tunnel umpteen times a day, to be able to do that stuff on location, despite sort of the craziness we had to go through to get here. In the end, we feel it's been worth it.
Congratulations. I mean, especially on surviving a year of living with your in-laws.
Yeah. I mean, luckily my in-laws, I still get along with them well. We went through that process okay. It was a close space at times, but, we were grateful that they gave us that opportunity, and I think they were grateful to get to live with their grandkids for a year. So there was tough things, but there were benefits for all of us.
Well, and I think good job for all of you there. I mean, that really, I think it speaks well of everybody that was involved to make that kind of an arrangement work.
Definitely.
With that, we're going to stop here, get a quick word from a couple of sponsors, and then we'll be right back with John Good from the Good Farm in Germansville, Pennsylvania. Perennial support for the Farmer to Farmer podcast is provided by Vermont Compost Company, makers of living media for organic growers since 1992. In the transplant greenhouse, all of your investment in plant material, heat, labor, and overhead depend utterly on the performance of the media where you expect your plants to grow. And that media has a really hard job to do. It has to produce a healthy plant in just a few cubic centimeters of soil. When I started farming, I focused on getting the cheapest possible ingredients I could to make my own potting soil. And later, I focused on finding cheap potting soil already put together. But you know what? I found what so many farmers have, that saving money on inputs doesn't always result in increased profits. Jennifer at Vermont Compost Company can tell story after story of customers like me who switched to less expensive options, but who have come back to Vermont Compost for the consistency and the quality of their potting soils. Feed the soil. VermontCompost.com. The podcast is also sponsored by Local Food Marketplace. Are you trying to scale up without the right systems? Instead of juggling email and text orders, spreadsheets for harvest and packing and delivery, and a separate invoicing system, Local Food Marketplace's software platform will help your farm automate these tasks and decrease errors with its fully integrated system for online orders, inventory management, order packing, invoicing, and payment processing. Easily configure the system for managing multiple sales channels, customer types, price levels, and delivery routes. The platform also offers lot number traceability and an option to collaboratively sell products with other producers. Contact them via their website, localfoodmarketplace.com, to schedule a free consultation on how Local Food Marketplace can help you efficiently manage customer orders from pack house to your customer's doorstep. All right, and we're back with John Good from the Good Farm in Germansville, Pennsylvania. John, you said earlier that you learned to have a maniacal focus on weed control. Can you tell us about how you're doing weed control there at the Good Farm?
Sure. I mean, like I said sort of before, we built our whole farm system around weed control. And the sort of the primary parts of that are, one, we grow on a 3-row system. We have 5-foot beds, center to center of tire track, with 3 rows on 15-inch centers. And the 3 rows is not the world's most efficient spacing. We could definitely do 4, maybe 5 rows on that same size bed. But 3 rows is easy to cultivate. It's easy because you're not trying to watch as much. And 2, it's easy because 3 rows, whether you're cultivating 1 row, 2 row, or 3 rows, your basic setups don't have to change. Like your center row never moves. Your outer 2 rows never move, never change spacing, whether you're doing 1, 2, or 3 rows. So that makes it pretty easy to cultivate. Again, I said sort of in terms of watching what you're doing, but also like the tools that are on my belly of my tractor don't have to move much because I use that same system. And I should mention that, sort of the centerpiece of our cultivation system, which is just one tractor because we're only 10 acres, is a Kubota 245 offset. That was that first tractor I bought. I bought at an auction, I guess our first year, so that was like 12 years ago. We got it for $7,000 at auction. It had around a little under 1,000 hours on it. I remember buying it. I was really nervous, and I went a little bit over. I think I wanted to spend $6,000 at the auction, but the auctioneer got in my face and really pressured me to buy it at $7,000, and I'm so glad he did because it's been a great tractor for us. And because it's worth more money now than it was when I bought it 10 years ago. Um, but we sort of center our cultivation system on that tractor. We put tools on the belly because it's an offset tractor. Most of my tools aren't fancy. I use sweeps a lot on the belly, and the sort of fancier thing we've done on the belly of our tractor is we've modified Bezzarides rolling cultivators to sort of make our own basket weeders. I've used basket weeders in the past, and they're great depending on your soil and soil conditions. We had trouble, especially at Rodale, a lot with crusting after heavy rain, where a basket weeder just really wouldn't do anything but roll on top of the ground. It didn't penetrate well enough for us when we would get crust. So we now have gangs of Bezzarides that basically look like basket weeders, in terms of their width. We have uh, two gangs on the belly of the tractor that go between our middle and outside two rows. And on the outside, on the shoulders of the bed, is just a single Bezzarides rolling spider. And those gangs, basically in the middle, it's just three Bezzarides joined together. We just built those with a friend and put a shank on them. They sort of take the place of where a wide basket would be on a basket weeder. And they're really good at penetrating the crust, sort of breaking through the ground. They're definitely more aggressive than a basket weeder was, but they still don't really throw soil. So I'm able to still cultivate at a high rate of speed through a crop that you can barely see, but really sort of penetrate the ground. We only use those on like really baby crops and greens and roots. And on the back of the tractor, we carry a Williams system, a Williams weeder from Market Farm Implement, which the Williams weeder is really just a nice tine weeder. And I love a tine weeder. It's just such a great tool. And what's nice about the Williams tine weeder is that it's very adjustable. You can make tines more aggressive or less aggressive, per the individual tine. And that can be really useful. I can be more aggressive between the rows, and with my in-row tines, I can sort of take them back a notch so they're not hitting the plant so hard.
Right.
And the other nice thing on the Williams is it has a double toolbar, and then you can just throw on whatever you want. We use all kinds of different configurations of sweeps and knives depending on whether we're doing 1, 2, or 3 rows. I always call it, I compare the Williams weeder to like a Swiss Army knife for a cultivating tractor. And like a Swiss Army knife, it can kind of do everything. It doesn't do anything really well. Like the can opener on a Swiss Army knife is not as good as a can opener, but it'll open a can for you. And that's kind of how the Williams works. Although the tine weeder on it, I think, is better than a regular tine weeder because of the adjustability in it. But for the most part, it's just kind of a great tool carrier. And I can put hilling discs on there, sweeps. We cut our plastic with it. We put a coulter in the middle to cut our plastic and then use sweeps to lift it up. So it becomes kind of a cheapo plastic mulch lifter.
Right.
So I really like that tool. It's not great if you're on sloped land, but if you're on nice flat ground, it works pretty well for us.
Are you using the guidance system on that?
We don't use the guidance system. It's just a toe behind cultivator. Anything I need to do really close and finicky, I do on the belly. And the back of it for me is basically just a tine weeder. And like I said, if I put sweeps or something on it, they're usually in like the larger spaces where they're covering the ground that the belly might be missing. If it's a 1-row crop or if it's a 2-row crop, they can cover the ground that I'm not going to hit with my belly, but I'm not like right up on the plants with it. And the tines, as far as the tine weeder, are fairly forgiving whether you're in the row or without the row anyway. But for the most part, it's just a tool carrier for us, and we haven't used the guidance system. I've heard people use, particularly they've adapted the Bezzarides guidance system to that tool and have really good success. I've never quite gone that far with it.
And I do want to back up and just ask a question about the Bezzarides rolling cultivators that you're using underneath. Are those these spider gangs, or I always thought of those as being a Lilliston, where it's a wheel, but it's got a whole bunch of tines on it, and it's spinning. And I've always thought of those as being something that really moved the dirt, or is it something different than that?
It basically is that, and they do, they move dirt, but only in a function of if you twist them. But if they run kind of straight, they really just sort of kind of cut through the crust and pulverize it. But they don't throw dirt unless you sort of angle them.
Okay.
So they'll kind of they'll aggressively cultivate the area in between the row, but they don't really throw, the way I have them set up, throw any dirt to the left or the right. I kind of compare them to those kind of gardening tools that your grandmother might have had, those like sort of spiky wheels that you would spin in the bed in between her flowers, when you were a kid. I kind of compare it to that. Like it's it's aggressive, but without really throwing soil. And we had a friend made those up a couple of years ago, and they've really worked well for us.
Nice, nice. And I think that crust breaking function can be so important. I mean, if you have any issues with crusting it, it really makes a difference even in the growth of the crops to get in there and break up that crust. But that crust can also provide kind of a home for a small weed to hold on in the soil if you end up with kind of a that if its roots are just in the crust. And if the situation's right, it can, you can just not kill them if you're only going through with the sweeps.
Yeah, it just gives you one more way to, in general with cultivators, none of them by themselves are really that good. It's a variety, I think, is important, when you're cultivating, using different tools at different times, because like you said, certain weeds and certain things just have a knack for swimming through what you're using. And, over time, you probably eventually will select for weeds if you keep using the same tools all the time that can survive your tools. And that's another thing I like about having the Williams weeder on the back is that tine weeder is sort of your second line of weeding. That I'll drag that through the ground that I'm doing with the belly, and like we're maybe using a sweep on the belly is just sort of loosening the weed. That tine weeder comes along as kind of like ripping it out by its head and knocking the dirt off of it. So I think sort of multiple layers of cultivation and using different tools and your tools are going to change over time because your weed species change over your time. You get better at using them. I don't think I've ever, really. At one point, I think I thought I was going to get a set in stone system, and it would work perfectly, and I'd be able to use that forever and ever. And now I realize that the worst thing you could ever do is have a set in stone system. It's good to have a bunch of different tools or a bunch of different ideas at least in your back pocket, and to be willing to evolve as kind of conditions change. Maybe it's more a really wet year, a really dry year. And also as weed species change and just the million different factors that are always kind of evolving on the farm and the different challenges you get presented with.
I do think that's one of the great things too about that Kubota L245, that the offset tractor, is that it, relative to a lot of the other offset tractors out there, I think it's got two big advantages. One is that it can go really, really slow, and it's hard to slow a 140 or a Super A down enough to do really close cultivation. And then it's got that 3-point hitch on the back, which gives you just an infinite array of tools that you can put back there.
You can throw on almost whatever, you can throw a tiller on in a pinch if you need to, or you can pull a transplanter with a 3-point draw bar if you need to. And we had a 140, or we actually leased a 140 when we first got to Rodale, in addition to the Kubota. And after a year, sort of the challenges of not having the 3-point hitch, the gas engine, which is giving you trouble all the time. In my perspective, the little whatever it is, 3-cylinder diesel on the Kubota is just like indomitable, just starts and runs. And the 3-point hitch is just so key. But that and the diesel engine are two things I just love about the sort of that newer generation of cultivating tractors. I mean, I don't know if there's much difference between that and the 1710 and the 265, and then you're just kind of getting into preferences. But I love that tractor. I'll just say that I love that little orange tractor. It's like a pet almost at this point, like a good dog or something like that.
I ended up with mine when my Kubota dealer actually came and dropped it off one day while I wasn't at the farm and said, "Here, just, keep this for a couple of weeks." Yeah, right.
It's a great sales pitch.
Thanks, Gary. And yeah, it was a great investment. And I think one of the really interesting things, you talk about learning about business, but we had that same experience where that tractor was worth more when I sold it than it was when I bought it. And so it becomes an interesting exercise in talking about, depreciation and cost of ownership and things like that when you have that situation.
Yeah. I mean, I've always sort of thought about that. If I ever decide to retire, I'm forced to retire, I can sell my equipment and live for a year or two. So that you do build up some equity in some of that stuff as time goes on.
I mean, it sounds like really for your cultivation, you're relying a lot on, I guess, attitude and approach far more than having, specialized tools. A lot of people now talk about, having the finger weeders and the, all of these other $12,000 implements. How do you make time to cultivate? Because I think that's one of the hardest things on the farm. When you're the guy who runs the cultivator, but you've also got to manage the farm operation. How do you balance that out?
That's a good question. I mean, I guess it's one of those things that if I'm cultivating or an employee is cultivating, because I have apprentices do it as well. But it's sort of when you're on the cultivator, you're kind of free to do whatever you want. That you go get that job done because whatever you're doing is going to save everybody else hours of time and struggle later if you get your job done well in a timely manner. So, if it's been rainy for a while and we haven't had a window to sort of keep up on cultivating piecemeal, either maybe I'll go out or somebody else will just go out first thing in the morning and just go all day and maybe the next day too. But just to make sure that, every week to 10 days, I like to cultivate everything on the farm. And that's just sort of something we've built into the system because it sort of saves you the time that you spend on it, and kind of a chicken and egg sort of cycle. If you can spend the time cultivating things when you really need to do it, you won't have a crew out there hand weeding it or trying to hoe it, or maybe they will be, but it'll take them half as long because you cultivated at the right time. I know this fall we had a day where I went out with the crew to cultivate some fall greens, in early September or something like that, and I had them all pulling row covers off so I could go through and tine weed really, baby greens. And it was kind of the end of the day. We were all tired. Nobody really wanted to do it. But when we got done with it, I was like, it only took us maybe 45 minutes or an hour to get through these beds we needed to get done. And even the crew helped move the covers at the end. We're like, I'm so glad we did that. That you could just see the conditions were perfect. We had basically hand weeded the crops with the tine weeder that day. They were going to require minimal investment from us from now till the end of the season. So even though it can be hard to get it in, you just have to. And one more. And speaking about finger weeders too, I think I've seen them a lot, and I'm definitely interested. But like you said, I just don't really see the need. I've always felt that a tine weeder does really pretty good in-row weed control for me if I use it at the right time, and it doesn't require a lot of extra cash and a lot of tinkering to get set up just so right. So up till now, anyway, I haven't really seen the need to go that route, so that I get good control with a tine weeder in the row, and I'm happy with that.
Now, the CSA you've really talked about as being the cornerstone of your operation. About roughly when you look at how your market breaks out now, how much is in CSA and how much in farmers market and wholesale?
The CSA is probably, I mean, for many years it was really like 100% almost, and even now it's still probably 85 to 90. We still do primarily CSA, and that's the type of growing we learned to do. We learned at the food bank farm, like I said, which was just solely a CSA, and caretaker farm, which were solely CSAs. There wasn't so much the idea at that time, in the beginning of CSA was that this was your marketing avenue to best support you while doing your job, and we weren't trying to do so many other things as well. And we kind of stuck to that. I guess we're kind of, an anomaly now, and we may have to change as the future goes. As maybe as if it seems like maybe right now the popularity of CSA has been kind of waning, but we're still doing all right that way, and it's still most of our market for our produce, and it's what we like to do. We like getting our produce to people. Now I'm more of a grower, but my wife really likes. Not that she's not a great farmer in her own right, but she really likes the community aspect and getting to know the people that we're producing for. It gives her and me too, maybe a kind of a higher degree of satisfaction in seeing the families that eat our food, and sometimes those great emails and feedback you get back from CSA customers. And occasionally you get the bad one too, but 10 or 20 to 1, it's people who just say, I've been brought to tears by the nice things CSA members have said to me, more times than I've been angry of somebody complaining about something. So in that respect, that sort of reinforcement of your work when you get it here and there is really one of the reasons we like still doing CSA growing.
And how do you do your CSA distribution?
We do our CSA primarily market style farm pickup. Um, when we were at Quiet Creek Farm at Rodale, when we were really close to our market, had been there for a really long time, we did 270 members on farm, all on farm with no deliveries. Since we moved, we're in a more rural location. So now, this past year anyway, we did about 100 CSA shares on farm and 100 at delivery sites. Just two sizes, a small, or we call it a small and a regular share. Um, on farm, we really like when it gets the customers to the farm, so they get to see you and see what you're doing. It makes adding choice to the share really easy on farm because you can do that just sort of by table, by crop grouping. We often have mix and match tables at the farm where members can pick whatever they want out of this table up to a set amount. So that gives members a lot more choice and freedom in their share without us having to sort of pack it or have a software system that does it for them. And the other big thing we really like about on-farm pickup is we've always done a pretty large U-pick garden, about an acre, 3/4 of an acre, and we can do a lot of crops that I wouldn't be able to pick weekly for deliveries. Our members can pick weekly for themselves, and we do a little bit of annual herbs, a pretty good amount of cut flowers. All our cherry tomatoes are in that U-pick garden. We have beans there, peas. Our strawberries are in the U-pick. And so sort of all those hot peppers are in there. Sort of all these sort of kind of difficult to pick, really time-consuming crops for box shares or from market. Our CSA customers pick themselves, and they love that experience. And we love the experience of not having to do it for them. And it's like another one of those kind of mutually beneficial or synergistic activities where it's good for us and good for them. And I feel like I don't even really charge my CSA members who come to the farm for the U-pick. Because we probably, if we were charging them for it, our share would be significantly more expensive. But it contributes so much to member happiness and member retention that we'll kind of always keep that as part, at least of our farm pickup.
Well, and I think it's one of those funny things too, where even if people don't take the time to go out and pick the beans, you've created the potential. There's a perceived value in the opportunity to go out and pick the beans.
Definitely, even if it's just taking a walk, through the rows or around the U-pick and taking pictures of the butterflies and flowers, that gives people that farm experience, that tangible experience that I think a lot of people are really looking for.
We haven't talked a lot about your wife, Aimee, and her role on the farm, and I want to make sure that we at least create an opportunity to give a shout out.
I mean, definitely, Amy's the heart and soul of our farm. I would describe her as, and the backbone of the farm community. I would think of her. She's a very loving, laughing person. People love to be around her, and she's a great worker. I kind of didn't get the chance to work with Aimee a whole lot for maybe the last 6 or 8 years when our kids were babies. She really took on raising them, and I really took on doing the farm work. And I had to learn to be a manager actually when we had our first child, because we realized that, oh, Aimee, you had been the manager, and I was the field worker, and so I had to learn how to manage people because she was always really good at that. And I sort of learned that while she was away, doing more of just the administrative work, which she did for several years while our kids were young. But now that they're getting older and off to school, Amee is back in the fields again, working for us a lot. This was our first summer really back on tractors again on a big scale, and she's a great worker and just a great person. Like, she is our farm ambassador. We get her in the share room when people are coming to pick up their produce, because Amee is just always laughing, always talking with people. They really like getting a chance to see her and talk with her. And I'm more quiet and reticent, so prefer being in the background out in the field. I did that role a little bit while she was raising our kids, but I'm glad to get more in the background. And the other thing that Amee brings to the farm that has always been sort of her specialty is that she's a phenomenal cook. Like, she could be a chef at a fancy restaurant. She's always been a really good cook and always really resourceful. She really knows how to use farm produce. And so she's been great throughout the years in sort of managing our member communication. and then providing recipes and cooking and storage tips to members um, that are really tasty. But she's also a farmer, so they're doable. They're not these sort of ridiculous you know ensemble pieces of meals that she's creating. They're quick, dirty, delicious farm meals, and she's great on getting that information out to the members on a weekly basis throughout the season. She does our weekly farm member update, telling you what's going to be available this week, roughly what amount. Here's one or two recipes, and here's how to store and use what's in the crop. And then in addition, she usually tells like a brief farm story. It can be anything from this summer we were finding baby tree frogs all over the farm to what the heck are row covers for. And she covers that kind of stuff on a weekly basis. And members love that information, and it's great to have somebody who can communicate it to them who really knows how it's done.
One more thing that I want to touch on before we turn to the lightning round is that you're on the board of directors at the Pennsylvania Association for Sustainable Agriculture, or PASA.
Mm-hmm.
You tell me a little bit more about the work that you're doing with them and the work that PASA does?
Sure. I just joined PASA's board a little over a year ago. So it was my first experience working on PASA, which is the Pennsylvania Association of Sustainable Agriculture. And, PASA has been, I think, sort of one of these, great symbols of the sustainable agriculture movement in the country, really, since inception. My wife and I went to our first PASA conference. I think it was in 2001 when we were at Caretaker Farm, actually, when we were interviewing there. Elizabeth Smith, who her and her husband Sam originally ran Caretaker Farm, they told us about this PASA conference down in Pennsylvania, and they said, "Oh, you've got to go down there. Everybody says it's the greatest." We had never heard of it before because we were from Pennsylvania, but had been farming in Massachusetts. So that winter, when we were back home in Pennsylvania, we went to the PASA conference in State College, Pennsylvania. And for listeners who haven't been to a PASA conference, it's like this amazing event. There's 2,000 sustainable or organic growers there of all shapes and sizes, food activists, and it's just this really sort of rallying point for the sustainable agriculture community. You just feel sort of this palpable energy of these people who are working tirelessly to change our food system to make it more, economically just and environmentally sustainable. And so we fell in love with PASA. It was actually going to that first conference when we thought, we're going to move back to Pennsylvania to farm because look at this, community and this institution that's there. And, so I can kind of credit the conference for us making it back to Pennsylvania to live and farm because we probably would have ended up in New England. Western Massachusetts was this Shangri-La of organic farming at the time too. But when we saw PASA for the first time, we knew we wanted to come back home, and we've been members ever since then. For 15 years or so. And I was approached once to serve on the board of directors when we were at Quiet Creek Farm, and I think it was the winter our first child was going to be born. So I turned down the opportunity at that time, knowing I'd just be too busy. But I was approached about running again 2 years ago, and I thought, I've always respected this organization, and they've offered us, so much in terms of community and information and inspiration over the years that I thought, well, now's a chance to. I thought I could always find an excuse not to do it, but I thought I had to, was maybe in a place now where I could offer something back to the community and to the organization a little bit. So, decided to join the board and I'm working in that work now, trying to help PASA continue to grow and change. It's a new era, I think, kind of in sustainable agriculture and organic agriculture in general, and we're trying to see where we're going to go next and how to best accomplish that. So we have this great board of directors at PASA. I mean, there's so many great growers and activists on that board that I went to the first meeting and I sat down and I thought, boy, I'm proud to be a member of this group of people, and also excited for hopefully what we can still accomplish out there. I think this sustainable food movement driven by PASA and organizations like it and the farmers has accomplished so much. And we've kind of got to this sort of, I think it was kind of like almost like a bubble, over the last 15 years or so that is, kind of slowing down right now. And I think it's to the point where we have to, get to the next level and really push this movement, hopefully more and more beyond the kind of the fringe of society and get people really invested in, eating good food and hopefully learning about soil. I think is something we're kind of excited about. Getting the idea of soil health into the public discourse, I think is something for maybe our next 20 years or so to work on here for PASA and like-minded organizations.
I'd probably be remiss here, and I don't want to sound like I asked that question just to have the opportunity to talk myself up, but I am going to be doing one of the keynote speeches at the conference this year, so I'm really excited that I get the opportunity to come back to PASA. Last time I was there, I really did have a great time, and I'm really looking forward to being there again.
Yeah, it's just an event you go to and just feel good when you leave, and it's right in the beginning of February, and you're like, go home and start eating onions. So it gives you that little bit of juice to get the season going. It's always sort of a great thing to have at that time of year.
With that, John, we're going to turn to our lightning round, but first we're going to get a quick word from one more sponsor. This lightning round and perennial support for the Farmer to Farmer podcast is brought to you by BCS America. BCS two-wheel tractors are often mistaken for just a rototiller, but it is truly a superior piece of farming equipment. Engineered and built in Italy where small farms are a way of life, BCS tractors are built to standards of quality and durability expected of real agricultural equipment, the kind of dependability every farm needs. I've worked with BCS tractors for over 24 years, and I wouldn't consider anything else for my small tractor needs. And I am not the only fan. More than 1.5 million people in 50 countries have discovered the advantages of owning Europe's most popular two-wheel tractor. And these really are small tractors with the kinds of features found on their four-wheel cousins and a wide array of equipment. Power harrows, rotary plows, flail mowers, snow throwers, sickle bar mowers, chippers, log splitters, and more. Check out bcsamerica.com to see photos and videos of BCS in action. bcsamerica.com. John, what's your favorite tool on the farm?
My favorite tool on the farm is kind of a funny one, I think, from a vegetable grower's perspective, but I love my grain drill. I have a little Massey Ferguson 33 rope lift grain drill that I bought about 5 years ago for planting cover crops. It's like 8 or 10 feet wide. It's a real simple old machine. I bought it for like $700. And it's one of those machines that I went out and planted in half an hour or whatever. I went out the first time and planted an acre of cover crop, and I said to myself, it paid for itself already. And I still love using it. It's just a fun machine to run because it's really simple but really well engineered. Like I said, I don't even have a hydraulic cylinder on. I still use the old rope lift, and it works so well. Like you plant a cover crop, and it looks like basically every seed comes up. You get like 100% germination, at least to my eye. And it turned what was like an arduous job with like a spinner seeder and a disc into something where I can go out and seed, several acres in a couple hours. And it doesn't matter if it rains or not. They're all going to germinate a couple days later. So it's so satisfying. I love that little grain drill. It's a great investment, and it's fun to go out and run it.
And what's your favorite crop to grow?
My favorite crop to grow, I think, would probably be high tunnel tomatoes. We do grass-fed tomatoes in the tunnel. They're just a lot of fun. They kind of let you to be a little bit more of like a geeky plant grower, a little more hands-on with the pruning and everything. But then they grow like magically, like Jack and the Beanstalk plants. They get so huge. They develop this perfect, delicious fruit that's easy to pick. Which is great compared to field tomatoes, which you're humping down the row with your back bent over and struggling. Where the high tunnel is just sort of like you walk down and they're just hanging there for you, all these beautiful fruits. So that's probably my favorite one to grow. Eating wise, I love muskmelons. Like I call them Pennsylvania mangoes here. I love muskmelons in terms of eating them, but they're maybe not as easy to grow and pick. But those are two of my most favorite crops.
And if you could go back in time and tell your beginning farmer self one thing, what would it be?
That's a tough one. But I think the biggest thing would be, it's hard to say it in one word, but would be to maybe not take yourself so seriously and not get so worked up when things go wrong. I learned since then, I think I mentioned it maybe before that I always thought I'd developed this beautiful system, where everything would work perfectly and I'd have be able to do things the same way all the time and just move them around and it would work so great. And one, I realized or I realized more and more that natural systems don't like human imposed systems imposed on them that much. They're always going to find a way to mess it up a little bit for you. And weather and the elements and diseases are always going to change what you do. And I've learned a lot from that. In retrospect, it's sort of the disasters that I've learned from. And now I'm big on another slogan on our farm is that obstacles are stepping stones. But when I was young and maybe more hot-headed, an obstacle was an obstacle, and I was going to get mad about it and be really frustrated. Where now it's I realize that an obstacle isn't personal. It's just something that happens, and it's hopefully an opportunity to get better. And in the long run, looking back on it, it is true. All those things that have gone wrong in the long run have been where we got better. And so now, after maybe that initial shock of maybe a disaster or something going wrong, I get over it more quickly and realize that, okay, well, what am I going to do to maybe get better so the next time this happens, I can handle it better, or it doesn't even happen again. So I think that's kind of the one thing I didn't have when I was young was the longer view and sort of learning from the disasters. That's pretty much what farming is, I realize.
John, thank you so much for being part of the Farmer to Farmer podcast today.
Yeah, thanks. It was always kind of fun to get to talk to somebody and hopefully more people who actually understand this weird world that we operate in.
Thank you. All right, so wrapping things up here, I'll say again that this is episode 150 of the Farmer to Farmer podcast, and you can find the notes for this show at farmertofarmerpodcast.com by looking on the episodes page or just searching for good. That's easy, right? GOOD. The transcript for this episode is brought to you by Earth Tools, offering the most complete selection of walk-behind farming equipment and high-quality garden tools in North America. And by Osborne Quality Seeds, a dedicated partner for growers. Visit osborneseed.com for high-quality seed, industry-leading customer service, and fast order fulfillment. And by CoolBot, allowing you to build an affordable walk-in cooler powered by a window air conditioning unit. Save $20 on your CoolBot when you visit farmertofarmerpodcast.com/CoolBot. Additional funding for transcripts is provided by North Central SARE, providing grants and education to advance innovations in sustainable agriculture. Now, you can get the notes for every Farmer to Farmer podcast right in your inbox by signing up for my email newsletter at farmertofarmerpodcast.com. Also, please head on over to iTunes and leave us a review if you enjoy the show, or talk to us in the show notes, or tell your friends on Facebook. We're at Purple Pitchfork on Facebook. And hey, when you talk to our sponsors, please let them know how much you appreciate their support of a resource you value. You can support the show directly by going to farmertofarmerpodcast.com/donate. I am working to make the best farming podcast in the world, and you can help. Finally, please let me know who you would like to hear from on the show through the suggestions form at farmertofarmerpodcast.com, and I will do my best to get them on the show. Thank you for listening. Be safe out there, and keep the tractor running.